Good evening. Welcome to the December 16, 2013 Board of Selectmen Workshop. Would you all rise and pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pretty short. Discussion, Tom Scanlon Jr., over the audit.
Welcome.
Thanks.
No introduction necessary.
Thank you for coming.
It's not snowing at least.
Like a yearly thing.
I have to get home quick, it's gonna start tonight.
Oh, is it really?
Come on,
Tomorrow.
tomorrow's day early.
Yeah.
Tomorrow during the day.
5 to 7 or something.
Oh, that much now? Yeah.
That's what they're saying.
Depends what station you listen to. You take all of them and you average them out, you probably end up with an inch and a half.
My next job, be wrong 50% and still get paid.
All right, so this is the June 30th, 2013 audit. Audit went really, really good. Some kind of highlights on the financial end. Again, the town received an unqualified opinion, which is the best opinion the community can get. Kind of some of the financial highlights I just want to hit with you is your free cash. Your free cash is certified at $875,000. How that got generated, it's on overestimating what came in over the estimate on state and local receipts of about $340,000. That's basically composed of motor vehicle excise tax, which I encourage always to be conservative on because that's definitely economic dependent. You know, as car sales go, so as excise go. So I think you're very conservative when it comes to excise. And then license permits and fees, I think are conservative there too, which is a good practice to get into. And then the other component of free cash is $423,000 of unexpended appropriations. The bulk of it coming from general government, public works, and insurance employees' benefits. So and again, you have a nice, good mix into your free cash. And how you use it, you should use it for like one-time events, which traditionally the town has done. You have a very good capital program where you're investing free cash into your capital. You're not using it to fund your operations. You do use some, but it's a nice blend what you have, and you're getting it back. You're getting a return.
Is this gonna cost us next year, because we used a lot this year, we had to?
Yeah, if you used it for reoccurring, it would.
I mean, are you gonna write bad stuff next year?
No, no. No, I'm not gonna.
I like it when there's nothing.
I know, yeah, the man's report definitely has gone down over the years.
Can't even take it in for reading.
So, you know, I think it's always important to know, like, where your free cash comes from, how you're using it. You don't want to, free cash is like one-time events. Again, if you start overestimating you increase your motor vehicle excise receipts, your free cash is gonna go down in the subsequent years. So I think you have a nice kind of blend of it. And your debt program, you're under 5% of your budget. I think you're around 3%, your principal and interest payments, which is good sound. So again, I think it's a well-managed town, how you're approaching your budget. Your stabilization funds, you have 4 of them, approximately 1.2 million. The general rule of thumb out there in the bonding world is you want to be around 10% of your budget into your reserves. Between the two, you're close to, I think you're over 2 million, 2.1 million. So again, your budget approximately about 16 million. So you're well above the 10%, which is good, sound practice.
That's all you got? Listen to me.
I'm just hitting the financial highlights on. Then on OPEB, you know, we always talked about other post-employment benefits, the promise of health insurance. Right now, on your financial statements, about 1.7 million. It grows about 400,000 each year. Again, kind of left in like the way OPEB worked was how many communities are going to put it on their balance sheet, how many are going to recognize it. You did that. You restructured your plans. Now a town, how Bodycom is going to look at it, you might want to start adopting like an OPEB trust or an OPEB stabilization and start funding it. And again, those are promises you made to your employees. Like you made a promise to Adam when we retires from here, you're going to pay some of his health insurance.
No.
Is that an estimate, Tom?
1%.
I missed the memo.
So like say we're gonna do Bo, and say
Yeah.
Bo's 60, so is that they're estimating he He's gonna live to 80? Is
Correct,
that how you-
yeah, someone there lies the truth, I'm not saying it's these numbers, because there's a lot of projections, probably need a new heating system, but,
That's the sound of it working.
oh, yeah.
That's okay.
You know, there's a lot of projections, you know, there's life expectancy tables,
Yep.
Health insurance, the increases in their rates.
Okay,
So
so that's all
it's-
figured, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's about as good as you can get to figure out. I mean, it's a promise you made to your employees. And again, with the whole theory behind it is, one position can trigger 4 costs. Say if you had people retire, like say take town administrator's position, you had 4 retirees, you'd be paying Adam's hard salary cost plus his current health insurance, plus all the people who retired before him in your budget.
So if everybody retired today on that list, if they were eligible and retired, that's what we'd have to pay.
This is the health insurance number, not the retirement.
Yeah,
so-
just,
Right.
just health insurance, yeah. More or less, that's what it's calculating. Again, so what again, the theory behind it is, what you're paying Adam a hard cost, but there's also a future cost that's going along with his pay, that you start putting that in your budget, so when he does retire, it comes out of that OPEB trust instead of coming out of the tax rate.
He's overpaid
I was
anyway,
gonna say.
so we're gonna take care of that soon.
Stop using me as an example. The question on, you said, you used the term made a promise, but it's actually required by statute.
Yeah, I mean, you adopted chapter 32B. section, so.
Made a promise sounds better.
I was gonna say, make
It sounds like you have discretion.
Yeah, we can break that promise today, okay?
Laws you can't.
Yeah, you adopted the law, so you know you have to do it. You can't go below 50% for your retirees' costs. And I would say just there's very few towns that could be in that position to even start thinking about funding it. So that's something, maybe in future budgets.
We have the trust, but we haven't been in a position where we've been able to use our free cash to add to that trust, to build it up, because we've always used it for, been using it for capital needs. And then obviously this year $400,000 to balance the budget, which,
So what are you seeing from other towns in this area? What's mechanism are they using to fund it? Just throwing out a free cash?
They have free cash, they're building it into their budget the best they can. You know, you got 2.5 limitations there. Any kind of new receipts like the proration of retirees' health of billing other communities may flow in that to the trust.
At some point, this is gonna be a negative on an audit, at some point. And
Yeah.
I know this state is slow and even recognizes it on their balance sheets, which is amazing that towns get kudos for finally acknowledging a liability on
Correct.
on their balance sheets. But the fear is you've gotta start funding it somehow.
You gotta start, and then that's kinda how it transitioned, is how the bonding, I mean, that's ultimately where the penalty is how the bonding companies are looking at you. And the first go around is who put the liability on their balance sheet? I mean, I still have some communities that refuse to put it on. The second is how'd you deal with it? Did you restructure your plans? Did you cut down the percentage? How'd you look at it? Which you've done that too. Did you adopt Section 18 of putting people on Medicare when they retire? So now the last step is, are you gonna fund it? And that's what towns are adopting the trust. You took that step, and now it's how to get money into that trust. And that's the whole trick of it, is you can put 100,000 in, let's say, and then when do you start charging the trust for those costs? I know some communities are thinking creative ways, is if any new hires, they're taking the salary and they're increasing it 10%, saying, okay, that's the cost we're gonna put into a trust over the life of this position. So when they retire, that'll be paid out of the trust. So, so I think it's more long-range planning than it is short-term. I mean, obviously, you're not gonna be able to, put $500,000 into your budget to fund the trust. But it's coming up with a plan, like how do I think of a way of like a stabilization fund. I mean, that's what you're really putting away. Same sort of concept, except in the OPEB trust.
Unfunded liability is gonna get bigger and bigger
Bigger.
and bigger.
Do you see, looking ahead 5-10 years, that a bonding company is going to be looking at this, especially closely and sort of see more accountability?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's either gonna go one way or the other. I mean, because your balance sheet now, if you look at your ending-wide statements, you're in a negative. I mean,
But I
Because
mean,
of
you said,
assets liability.
yeah,
you say,
you're not in a negative, but.
you said right now that the first step is recognizing it and looking at how to structure it, but going forward, is it expect the institutions that do the loans and the
Yep.
you know, finance, the data are gonna be looking at that more and more closely. Is that, you see that getting tougher each year, or another 5 years, we have to
Well,
have, start
I
paying
would
into
probably say
it?
another 4 or 5 years before they really get tough on it, but just from management's perspective, it is
ahead
an
of that.
unfunded liability. You didn't make a promise that you should start funding, you know, the sooner you can do it. I mean, if you did it 20 years ago, I mean, just take the cost of your retirees out of your budget and you'd have that freed up. So it's more long-range planning than it is short-term planning. I guess just having that knowledge base that there is a cost out there. And it really stands out. I know I have one community where a position rotated over 5 times. Each person took 3 years of serving it and retires, 3 years of serving it and retired. And when you looked at it, they actually had their health costs for that one position was astronomical because they had 5 retirees in one active position. So those are the kind of concepts and procedures and policies that's kind of contradicting. But again, it's looking at that, you know, going forward is probably trying to work the way to fund that OPEB trust. And again, you're part of a regional school, so the regional school has that unfunded liability on their balance sheet. You know, you're not showing the teachers on yours. So this is just the cost of just your general employees, not your school. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, you're part of a regional school.
People can't forget that goes through our assessment, so we're paying for it.
Correct.
That's why it behooves us to get involved and see if we can do any kind of control.
But they don't build up the fund themselves.
No, but this is when you look at your liability.
But it's a
you know,
liability you're
1.7
stuck
million.
with.
Yeah, it's not on your balance sheet, it's on their balance sheet, but really,
Yeah, you're paying
It's coming
for
back
it.
to
yeah,
us.
correct, yeah, I mean, you're the
Either way,
largest
it's
funding
coming
source.
back here.
Yeah.
You remember what their number is offhand, Tom?
You know why, I do
I
not
remember
know
it
what
was
I,
big.
yeah, I don't know off the top of my head,
I
but.
thought they were carrying over $1 million.
No, it's way more than
Well, they have
that.
3 times as many employees as
Oh,
us.
yeah, no, I
Way, way
would,
more.
it's
For
larger. than that.
retiree, I thought it was just $1 million.
Well, that was just insurance, though.
That's just the annual
Yeah,
cost of.
OPEB
We're
costs.
talking about retirees
Raises.
as long as they're gonna be getting the benefit.
Yeah, so I think that's one thing, keep in mind, is like your numbers only, they don't reflect those school
Right.
numbers.
It's triple R's.
So listen, last year I said, how are we doing? And you said out of your 90 towns, we were in the top 5. Before you answer, if you're gonna say we're still in there or better, that's fine. If not, just say you don't wanna talk about it. See that? See how I do that with the newspaper?
Well, I always measure our audits that if we're in before mid-September, you must be pretty good because you're getting your books closed and you're balancing. I mean, we're coming in there and assessing risk and doing your balance sheets. I mean, you must be balancing cash and your receivables on a timely basis. So the time of field work, yeah, you're still the top. I mean, you definitely, I associate kind of tone at the top, starts at the top, and works his way down. Long if you could tone at the top, it feeds its way down to his employees, which the town, I believe, is very well managed. You approach your problems head on, not gonna remember, this was a lot thicker, probably 15 years ago. So, I mean, that's always refreshing to see.
6 years ago, it was 8 or 9 things on there.
Yeah. So, again, yeah, no, it's definitely, I think of it as one of our top clients, absolutely.
Not to be the pessimist, but again, we've got to, if you're looking at 4 years, this audit here becomes, our barn rating gets affected if we don't address some of these areas, the health, the benefits and the retiree benefits, which we haven't touched on, another
Yeah.
area.
I mean,
This good audit becomes a bad one in 4 years because we've got to start funding it, and we're in no position to do significant funding.
yeah, I
in
mean,
any of these.
that's the biggest financial impact to see going forward is on your financials. You'll still get a qualified opinion, unqualified opinion.
Yep.
Because you're doing the OPEB, but it's what you're dealing with that liability, you're gonna see it grow.
Well, that along with other capital issues, we've been trying to find ways to address roads as well, and, roads get a lot nicer to lay down new asphalt than it is to put money aside for retirement funds, because you can see it, people drive on it, they appreciate it, it's not nearly as glamorous.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean,
There's not nearly as much sizzle with the retirement fund.
I met with some of our towns, and the same thing is roads are unfunded liability, just like your OPEB. I get that argument all the time, and they do have a point. But again, as you get out into the bond market, it's putting that all together.
Yeah, I think it's important. Every town's faced with this right now. It's not
Yeah.
just.
I mean, yeah.
It's coming faster than we know.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely gonna have costs, you're definitely gonna, I mean, it's just the economy which is driven, it's how you manage it. And like I said, going back to that donut at the top, I think that's, the town is very, I mean, I think it's well managed. I mean, I've seen plenty of clowns out there and, you know. Spencer ain't one of them.
That's a good quote.
We don't have a buffoon.
Really?
We'll pull the clown car, I'm sure.
Stick around.
I mean, on the, so end of the financial, and so the management letter, it's kind of a byproduct of, you know, I don't think, you know, I've never done an audit and not issue a management letter. You know, I always find something strong point. You kind of want to see not in a management letter as a material weakness or significant deficiency. As those two terms kind of speak for themselves. You don't have any of those. You know, we do have two current kind of other matters and informational items. We kind of labeled them. As we went into the water fund, we dove in, you had a balance of approximately $200,000 on a water project. When we looked into it, it was really a leftover balance. It was an appropriation that the town voted to put into the project, but that subsequent, and I think it had a lot to do with changed personnel at the time, you know, it got reimbursed from the WPA to the Water Pollution Abatement Trust. So that was the excess funds sitting there in the project was closed. Again, that probably wouldn't have been caught, like the department was balancing out to the general ledger, so it's really water free cash sitting in a reserve account. So help the water fund by closing that out.
So help out a layman here. So what happens to that 200, that almost 200,000 that you find? Where does it go then?
It gets good, we close it out to water's free cash, undesignated. So it affected, it would be sitting in a reserve, because as you borrow the money, say you could do $1 million project, you borrow the $1 million, and $1 million sits in a reserve account, and you spend it out. So if you don't spend it all, it's still sitting in a reserve account, and it has to be, match on loss, has to be voted to a like project. When sitting at 200,000, we kind of say, well, geez, how'd you not spend 200,000? When we looked into it, it was really, the town voted somewhere towards the end of 12, an additional 200,000 to do associated with paving and the roads and the water project, but they really didn't need it, because that, subsequent to that, the Water
The other
Pollution Abatement Trust
project.
approved the funding.
I know what that is.
Yeah,
Water
something-
Street, was that Water?
No, that was when we did Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
National Grid did some work and they had to pave, so instead of them paving the road,
We took
they gave
it
the
and-
money to us.
Right.
So we paved the whole road.
Right.
That's what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, you waited over the
Right.
winter.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
like,
we
it
waited over
was
the
gonna be
winter.
ineligible exactly what it was.
We did it in the springtime because it was
Right.
too late in the year.
Yeah,
I
correct.
just, what kind of money what the heck that was, so.
Yeah, that's
Exactly
exactly what it
what
was.
it is.
It sat in a reserve account
Right.
on the balance
Right.
sheet, and it really should have been closed back to water. But again, that would be, every time you have like major capital projects on the departmental level, tying back to that ledger, will help, you know, pick those things out.
So that's money available for future capital or money that?
No, that goes back into the water reserve.
Yes, but.
And we can use it, anything to do with the water.
Yes.
Yeah.
but-
Retained
so-
earnings.
That's,
Right.
Retained earnings, yeah.
Yeah,
Case
so it
of
can be
emergency.
used anything for a water project, anything can be used for operations, anything.
so it doesn't require another vote at town meeting or anything like that?
Well,
Yeah, it
well, it
does.
does. You just,
Well, you gotta move it anyway.
their version of free cash is called retained earnings, ours is free
Okay.
cash, but for them, they typically will use it for capital purposes. They have a capital efficiency plan, it's like purchase a truck, whatever.
Okay.
And if they don't use it, it will roll into next year's retained earnings, just kind of like an ongoing.
Correct.
But we have a large water main break, we can use the money for that and stuff like
But
that.
it requires vote at town meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a matter of its geography on the balance sheet really to tie out. You know, 'cause what could happen if it stayed in a reserve, the water retainers would have been lower, and you wouldn't have access to that funds until next year, until it got closed out.
Right.
That's
So that's one of your official acts is to move it out of that reserve
correct.
status?
Yeah, we gave the town accountant an adjustment to do that. It was part of your retained earnings that was certified this year. All right, and then, for an informational item, the reason we put them in here is because you got two GASBs coming out, that are gonna impact you, and it could delay your audit reports. The major impact is GASB 68. No, we talked about OPEB, the unfunded liability. GASB 68 is the pension side of it. I mean, there's already been pension standards, but this just refines it. And it kinda, the way it looks at the standard differently than your actuary you get done now. Right now, the actuary determines what your unfunded liability is, it produces an ARC, an annual required contribution, that's what you pay to the retirement system. What this looks at is, are you paying enough to what your true liability is? So it looks at from the past and goes forward. So you could have an asset on your books, or you could have a liability. I think the general cutoff, if your pension, I want to say somewhere about 65% is funded, you're probably going to have an asset on your books. So again, that can take some requirement with, Worcester County retirement and actuarial basis. And that could delay the issuance of audit reports. That's why we're trying to get the message out early. It's year 2015 is the implementation period.
Fiscal 15?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of looking at the pension, the same thing as the OPEB, we're kind of putting out, okay, you've been paying this for a number of years to fund this unfunded liability, but is it truly funded? And looks at the different market conditions, the assumptions.
Ask you a stupid question. Typically on a town's books, and you could probably answer this too, without going in and opening up the balance sheet.
Yeah.
Where are we reporting the employee contribution piece of the pension?
Well, what happens is, like, as you said, as Tom said, there's an actuarial study that basically tells us what the liability is for the town of Spencer, and actually their whole fund for Worcester County Retirement. And then based on what our payroll is and what our current employees are paying, they figure out kind of what's owed in the past and what will be owed in the future. And based on that, they'll come up with an assessment that we pay every year. And other towns pay similar assessments based on those same formula. So at the end of the day, I think it's 2040, where they're trying to become 100% solvent. Tom, I think he used the number 65%. I think 2 years ago, I think Worcester County was about 50%. So let's say their total payout is 800 million, and a couple of years ago it was 400 million. So now they have to work over they have a plan in place to work over the next so many years to get to that point where they're completely solvent.
Those calculations, are they net of the employee payroll contribution?
Well, yeah, they factor that in. I mean, it's kind of like a combined formula. You figure out what employees are paying, what your payroll is now, what employees are paying, and, what people were paying before in the past and now are receiving, and then eventually what the benefit's gonna be. So they are pooled together to come up with a number in terms of what our assessment is. And our assessment's going, it changes on a year-to-year basis, obviously based on payroll, but in addition to that, it will go up, say 12 or 14% a year in order that they can catch up to that big point where they become fully solvent. So.
And that assessment is only the employer's piece. The employee's piece is run through withholding. We take it out, so that's how it gets over to the county. So that's something that's gonna impact you. I think it's gonna be, Adam's gonna have an additional responsibility along with your town accountant to get the information, produce it. And that's kind of the reason we're putting it in there, because it's gonna have an impact.
So we need to start thinking about it in terms of an action on that.
Correct.
In terms of,
Communicate with the county, what are you doing about Gatsby 68? Because right now, they're doing an actuarial study based on Massachusetts general law to come up with your assessment or your ARC. This looks at it totally different than that actuarial, so you almost have to have two. You still have to pay your assessment and come up with that figure. Now, this is I've heard the actuary's gonna do two within the same one.
if you have an additional liability over and above beyond what you're paying
Correct.
your retirement, you're gonna have to also create a fund like a trust fund.
Yeah,
Start building up the
one looks
liability.
at it prospectively, and the other one looks at it retroactively. So saying, okay, this is what your liability is, but did you actually fund that compared to your market assumptions? And that's Gatsby 68. So it looks at it a little bit different. Are you truly funding your liability out there? It takes in the market conditions and stuff. So that's just a matter of communication. It's gonna just roll onto your balance sheet, kind of like your OPEB. I'm gonna give you more of an economic measurement standard on there. There's gonna be more communication on your lane. And then we had just 3 of the prior year, and they're all resolved. Proration of the retirees' health insurance. You are building a communities, you understand the law, and that's what we talked about, maybe as you get more retirees out there, maybe taking those funds and shipping them into an OPEB trust. As you build the communities and receipts come in, I probably wouldn't set budgets for that on local receipts.
We count it as special revenue now? Or do we count it?
No, going right into free cash,
Right now it goes right in free cash.
yes. That's why I wouldn't start estimating that to fund your budget. You know, say you collect $10,000 off of this, I wouldn't use 10,000 as a local receipt on your recap. I would just keep it at 0.
Correct.
Then some future day, maybe we can establish by putting those funds into an OPEB trust.
So let's say we had X amount, $100,000 of free cash this year, we're gonna do 90,000 for capital, we can take 10,000 of that.
Yep.
And turn around and put it in this fund.
Correct. The withholding accounts, town account went through and reconciled all the health insurance withholding accounts, which was good to see. And then retirement deductions, they definitely fixed that little glitch in the system that picked up overtime as on the recalculation, so that code was fixed. So, yeah, I mean, that was, he fixed all three, which were minor. So, they definitely address your issues as pointed up. So if anyone had any specific questions, or,
I'd just like to go back to the first one with the water department.
Yeah.
You know, not to imply a criticism here or anything
Yeah.
like that, but I'm wondering, now that 200,000, is that sort of thing that we're aware of here, and that we wait for the auditor to come and move it, or is that something that we will be more on top of in the future?
What I'd say is it's not uncommon to have unspent balances in capital project funds. We have them, we buy a dump truck for 57 grand, and we budgeted 75, so there's 18 sitting in an account right now. So we go, I mean, with those, actually, we go through the process of going to town meeting, and we take those from an active standpoint, and we use those and transfer them to, say, another capital purchase and offset, or add it to our additional availability of funds that we will use to make future capital purposes. So in this case, there was just a delay of a particular large-scale project. There was, multiple reasons. One was due to weather, due to the fact that a utility company was doing some work, so we were holding off doing work. So got to a point where, in addition, we were also using a combination of funds like Chapter 90 and retained earnings in order to do different aspects of the project. So at the end of the day, we ended up with a reserve amount from that we borrowed that hadn't been closed out yet. And Tom went through the process of closing it out, which then allowed the water department to have access to additional funds. They borrowed it, they meant to use it, it just got to a point where certain things happened and that balance was still available. So I think that particular case is kind of not the norm. I mean, otherwise it would have shown up in other audits, obviously. It happens on a much smaller scale. We purchased a cruiser last year for $37,500, and we had budgeted $38,500. So $1,000 is sitting in that account. I think it's one of the things that Tom and I worked on when I first came into this position was there were some of those capital accounts that had been lying around for 10 years. So I think those of you that recall being on the board when I first came on, and we looked at ways, and we do that continuously, way we fund our capital projects, we always target those available funds first, and then our free cash before we go to the point of asking people for debt exclusions or asking people to use available funds before increasing taxes and other types of things, or using available levy. So in this case, it was just peculiar to that one project. It was a large project. I mean, if you look at Pleasant Street, I mean, we were talking combined with the water tower project that was going on, you're talking about
It
$8
was all
million.
part of the same deal.
Talking about $8 million worth of water infrastructure projects. So at the end of the day, there was $200,000 left in an account that, it's not like that money's available and they can go ahead and spend it on whatever they want. You have to go through the process of going through a town meeting and making use of it. And Tom went through the process of setting it up for us that they could access it by rolling into retained earnings. And then from there, they can go to town meeting and then have true access to it when they actually get voter authorization to spend it.
yeah, and I was just concerned, like, it was a major project. It was like a 2-zone project. There was multiple funding sources. There's some
Multiple
delays.
loans.
So, yeah, I mean, and as accumulation, you had different directors leave, turnover of personnel, so, there's different communication issues on that whole perspective. It was a major project. I think it was an isolated incident.
You mentioned creative ways of towns, the way they've handled the health benefits issue for retirees.
Yep.
Have you seen anything similar with pensions, the GASB?
No, 'cause it's a fairly new standard coming out, yeah. I mean, it's pretty much, probably whatever county retirement you're in, where I think you're 2040. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen too much, it's pretty much straight out. That's like, OPEB is kind of shooting moving target. Pension is what it is, it's defined, you know what the benefit's gonna be. Health insurance is kind of all over the board.
Well, in terms of retirement assessment, when we pay Worcester County, it's part of the operating budget, so we have a budgeted item. And then we usually get, somewhere in January, February, a prediction or an invoice of a potential bill, of what our liability will be come July 1st, so we can then incorporate it into the operating budget. So if it's $570,000 last year, and this year it's gonna be $630,000, we'll factor that into the operating budget, and it'll have to come out of additional, the 2.5 levy that, or new growth. It's just gonna have to be budgeted, and if you get to the end of the day where you have more expenses than revenue, you have to cut expenses. So it's not one of those things that's so large that we're asking people through overrides or anything to pay. It's something that we factor in every year. But now on top of that, like Tom said, could be an asset,
Correct. I mean,
but we don't know until we actually go through the study. So, but if it is a liability, it's not going to be something that's double or triple what you're already paying. It's, you could probably factor in, it's going to be, I guess you don't know, but
yeah,
the liability that we have is pretty large already, and the employees, there's a large contribution going on already there as well, plus what people contributed before, so, we shouldn't go through the study and see that, we have millions of dollars of liability like we have in OPEB.
I think the whole theory behind it is, you gotta stop, these things exist, you gotta stop pushing off to tomorrow, because tomorrow's coming. 10 years ago, it's coming. It's kinda like your sick leave buyback, and you adopted a fund years ago, and you're funding that, so as people leave, it's being paid out of that trust. So it's the same concept on that. Which, you're one of my few towns that funded that sick leave buyback, which is.
A lot of folks will use, when it comes to the point of someone retiring, they actually go, take it out of benefits or whatever, and then they'll have to put money back in with free cash come May.
Yeah,
And we actually have a fund set up for that.
yeah, so that's sound practice when you start funding your future liabilities.
Everybody all set?
Right.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Anytime, and if you have any
Thanks.
questions throughout the year, don't hesitate to contact
That's
me,
good
if problems
news.
come up, don't hesitate to contact me.
Thank you.
Thanks, have a great holiday.
You too, yeah, everyone have a good holiday.
You too.
Maybe the Patriots will win the Super Bowl, and
Wake up from that dream. What game did you watch yesterday?
I didn't watch it, that's why.
Smart. The pain at the end wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
I didn't get past halftime, I'm like,
I knew they weren't gonna do good, because they did better in the first half this game, so it's the second half.
Yeah, it was the opposite of normal.
Everyone was thinking that, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to
See you,
watch.
Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Nice holiday.
Okay. You wanna do that? Discussion on review fiscal year 2015 budget development materials. Mr. Goddard.
Mr. Chairman and fellow board members, as you know, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about outlining the FY 2015 budget. Now that we've put closure to FY 2014 through the state decision and the amended assessment for the school district, and then going through the process of a special town meeting and amending our budget, we can now move forward. As last week, we talked about different goals that we'd like to set. I talked about the process of going through a priority-driven budget, talking about the difference between a core service and elective service, and advising the board that we'll have to make some decisions or the board will have to make decisions come spring in terms of which services we move forward with, based on the fact that we can expect a major deficit already going into next year, based on the additional assessments, additional liabilities, and the fact that we don't have the free cash that we just used 2 weeks ago to balance the budget. So with that, I gave you a copy of my memorandum to department heads outlining the process for their budget materials, things that they'll be required to submit. They're working on that now, and if you refer to the calendar that I've provided you, after the holidays, after the new year, January 9th, those budgets outlines, and not only monetary, but also the narrative that's to be assigned to the monetary parts of the budget based on those essential, non-essential details. That is all due on the 9th. And also capital outlay requests, we're gonna try and go through the normal capital process, knowing that we may have little money come May, but those needs don't go away. So we have to go through that process. I gave you a copy of the long year plan that we did a couple years ago, showing you what's been funded, what hasn't. And then I've asked the department heads to revise this based on any new items that are coming on, or any rearrangement of things that have been requested over the next 8 years, beginning in FY15. So with that, back to the calendar, January 13th, our first meeting in the new year, I will start talking about revenues and kind of give a little more detail in terms of the outlook for the budget. Again, within this town, or within what you find on the municipal side of things, we always start with our revenues. So that's the first thing that I'll put together for you. We'll go through the process of how we define the tax levy, what the statuses of different debt exclusions, overrides that have been granted in the past, most recently the one for the ambulance service that we're using. Talk about 2.5 levy increases, new growth, et cetera. And then come the end of January, at the MMA meeting in Boston, the governor will issue his first budget, known as the H1 budget, and at that point, he'll give his first crack at what state aid would be. So we'll incorporate that into the budget mix. So between January 9th and January 28th, I'll work with staff on fine-tuning those budgets, and then on February 10th, coming in and making a presentation to this board regarding what the budget picture looks like. And what I'm forecasting at that point is, obviously, this is what the deficit is. So based on the services that we've been providing, based on any tweaking that we've been doing, I'm not asking the staff to go through the process of making a decision themselves in terms of what is essential and non-essential. Basically, going to put that in the hands of the board through the process of meeting with them, getting recommendations from the finance committee, and then probably, I also incorporated here, and you'll see in a minute, public hearings from the public. So all of those things will lead you to making some decisions as you set the warrant, the overall operating budget for the town, as you close the warrant at the end of, as you close it in April. All those factors will lead you into making those decisions. So again, February 10th will be my first initial budget presentation to you. We'll define what the deficit is. The capital committee will hear initial staff presentations in the beginning of February. We'll begin meeting with the finance committee, making a similar presentation that I made to this board in terms of what the budget status is. And then we'll begin on February 19th with what we're calling a municipal services review with this board. And we'll invite the finance committee and staff members. So staff members will be coming in. I'll give you the narrative ahead of time, along with the budgets, individual budgets ahead of time. Go through the process of discussing all the services that each department provides, how they fund them, what it means if you don't fund certain things. And we'll go through the process of doing that on the 19th, the 24th, and then as we move forward to March 10th, and eventually on March 17th, which you make your advisory recommendations to me in terms of what tweaks I need to make in the budget based on the presentation of those services and the impact of the services by staff, and all working towards March 24th, where we finalize municipal services, a final presentation from the school, and then the public hearing on the warrant on April 1st with the finance committee, the selectmen closing the warrant on April 7th, finance committee making their recommendations on the 8th, and then town meeting is on May 1st. Any questions in terms of the calendar, stuff I put in the memo, or in terms of what I have assigned to the board based on our discussions that we've had, and obviously based on the situation we're in, or capital? I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Through the chair, we've all pretty much come to the agreement that we're going to be going through pretty much a line-by-line review this year. And if we agree to do it this way, I'm sorry, but I'd like to see, as if you were at a private sector company, if you're a manager of a department and you see ways you can, it's gonna come, and I would rather have help from our capable department heads in helping us find where we may be able to save money for the town and save services than just 100% throw it in our hands and maybe make some decisions that wouldn't be in the best interest of the town.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you, and respectfully, and what I'm gonna say is that, for example, when you look at the police department, and certain things that they do, it's not a matter of doing things differently so much that will save money, it's basically which things do you not wanna do anymore. And that's why I'm saying, this is a policy-setting board, this is, you guys advise staff in terms of what policies, what direction, where you wanna spend the town's money, and then you guys set the warrant. You can point blank ask them, okay, for example, animal control. If we cover a series of different calls, 10 different calls, dog bites, cats running loose, a horse, got out of its stall, et cetera, and all those different types of things. They're not gonna advise you as to which ones which ones you wanna do, because right now we're funding those. And it's basically gonna be up to this board and say, through the series of making up $700,000 or $1 million, saying, okay, we're only gonna do calls 1 through 3. Okay, I don't know if I can, you wanna make a recommendation from you want the staff to make a recommendation and say, well, which ones should we do and which ones shouldn't?
It's more, do they have any, as department heads, any creative ideas on how to supply these services?
What I'd say is that that's already been done, and that the creativity's already taken place. We do have some conversations going that are based on either, people retiring or a new opportunity in terms of regionalizing a particular service, but, when you meet with the library, she'll say, I fund this program with a grant. The way I limit the health benefit liability with my department is I have only 3 full-timers and I have 8 part-timers. So, so I think we're at a point now where you're gonna find, when you go through these budgets, the creativity, there's not much room there anymore. It's basically gonna be, the way to save money is to do without certain services.
And I'm prepared to make those decisions when we go through the budget.
They'll be happy to answer questions, like if you say, have you explored regionalization with,
Yep.
say, animal control? And we'll say, yes or no, or dispatch, or library, and what's going on right now? And what creative things have you been done, and what creative things can you do? You'll find, based on the fact that we haven't added an officer in 15 years, and, all those different things that we've talked about, the creativity is pretty maxed out to the point where, it's either do it or not do it. And which, obviously, I think they've accepted the fact that we're okay, we're at that point, we're not gonna be able to do certain things anymore. And it's up to the board, as policy-setting board for the community, kinda like we talked about, with the transfer station, are we gonna do that, or are we not gonna do it? With free sand, are we gonna do that, or are we not gonna do it? Those are decisions that you're gonna have to make. If you go to the highway department and say, should we do it or should we not? They're gonna probably turn it back and say,
My point was just to give them one more opportunity, and if we're at that point where it's do with it, do without, then, I'm prepared as a member of this board to do that.
And I think where Tony's coming from is from the private sector, you do a cost improvement plan, and then you do a methods engineering time study plan, and I think that's where he was coming from.
Well, I understand the question. I'm just saying that these are things that what we've been doing all along, and we do on a daily basis. Like I said last week, I put in a report. I had a meeting last week with several town managers regarding regionalization of certain services. So these things are always ongoing, and we're always considering them. But when I'm trying to give you an example. In terms of accounting department, we've got 1.5 people there. There's not much room for creativity in terms of that department. I mean, it's bare bones. We have certain staff members that are part-time, and you can't go any lower, otherwise you're not gonna have anyone doing that service, and you have to provide certain services by law. In other areas, you have, people providing a particular service, and it's gonna be the matter of, okay, we're not gonna provide that service anymore, so therefore, we're not gonna need that labor anymore. That's kind of the point you're at.
Yep, if that's.
Which I think we were all accepting.
No,
and
if you're,
accepting.
I
We're at
just
that
want
point.
to confirm if that's the point we're at, then, I know what we've got to do. I'm ready to do it as a member of this board.
I will reiterate, for them actually, to be prepared to answer any questions regarding creativity, to make sure you can explain where you are today, what things you've done to provide the services you are today, and if there's anything else you can do and what you can explore. However, they're at a point now where it's gonna be January and it's gonna be, this is the budget and this is the way we do it. Obviously these things like regionalization, sometimes they take years to put together. Regional dispatch with Worcester, it's taken 4 years and it's still nowhere. But I appreciate the concern, and I'll pass it on that, a last-ditch effort, or at least explain creativity relative to the particular service, that you either are exploring, have explored, or you'd like to explore before you go ahead and make that final decision.
Yeah, because, when it comes to our review, it's gonna be.
Yeah. I think we're all prepared for that.
Maybe, Mr. Chairman, maybe just, something that's been, that's occurred to me is, as we talk about, potential overlap, or gets back to Tony with some creativity. This may be oversimplification, but I hear from Pam with the Council on Aging and the Senior Center, there are certain instruction that seniors need, whether it's using a computer or dealing with forms and all. And I also hear from Mary that there are people come to the library needing instruction on computers. Is there a point where, or is it just naturally happening now where Pam says to Mary, we've got this overlap in our audiences and in the people we're serving, and so does one pick it up versus the other in order to do it more efficiently? I mean, are there opportunities like that?
Maybe,
I know it depends a lot on what happens with Maple Street and, what kind of facilities.
I think
we
what
have.
you find what ends up happening is you deal with the issue of the day. So if Joe Smith walks in, he's just been laid off from a job and he doesn't know how to use a computer and he wants to apply for a job and online, or he doesn't have a computer and the only way to do it is online, are you saying if he's under the age of 65, does the library turn around and say, hey, go to the senior center and do it?
I'm just wondering where they're going and if they find that they're dealing with the same issues at two different locations.
It's possible. I don't know if it's not 1,000 people. It could be, is there one or two people that you could steer in a different direction? Maybe it's possible.
Well, I guess as we talk with department heads and all, that's sort of the question I might have for some of the audiences we're trying to address.
I think what ends up happening is in that case they serve their constituents. So if I go to the building department and I need to file a particular permit online, they have a computer outside their office, can they walk me through it? Do we turn around and say, no, you can't do it here, you gotta go to the senior center because she's got free time and you gotta go up and do it there? There's a senior who's 65 and over, doesn't have a computer, and we say, no, we're not doing it here. She says, no, we're not doing it here, you need to go to the library because they're doing it there. I think what ends up happening is you deal with a constituent that's in front of you, with the case that's in front of you, and because that's who you particularly serve. You may find an instance then you have someone from the building department, let's say the centralized location is the library. Okay, so now the building inspector is saying, go to the library and they'll help you fill out the computer. Well, is the library gonna be able to answer building questions? How do I fill out this? It talks about the value of the cost of the project. Does that mean, does that include labor? All those different things. So what happens now is you have a question, you're at that department, you have a particular question for that department, it's answered there. So we can certainly ask the questions, John, I don't know, how to really answer it. But we can explore it.
Okay. No, I think that's just what we're gonna be, faced with is to make the most of the dollars we've got. Just one example.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. That's the calendar.
That's the calendar.
Work from there.
No other questions for me?
I have a question just about the long-range capital planning. Maybe I missed the key on this, but we've got yeses and nos for fiscal Y 13 and 14. And the checks are projected years where these needs are gonna be coming up? Is that what?
Yeah, what we did 2 years ago is we started for FY, at the end of FY 12, or at the end of 2012, we said, okay, give us the next 2 years, 10 years, what items do you forecast as being needed, starting with the first year, FY 13, going through into 2022, estimate dollar costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then what I did was, I took that plan and then put in here what we funded in FY 13 and FY 14. What I haven't done is basically take things that were no, and then move them over to the right.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm asking the department head
Okay.
to tell me, I'm assuming most of them go in FY 15, but based on that, if things get added to FY 15, does that mean realistically, we can take some things and we can push them, they go from FY 15 next, FY 16, and some things go from FY 18, FY 19. I'm leaving that up to the department head to do that exercise and then explain to the capital committee and to this board why. For example, engine number 3 is coming up estimated $400,000 this year, okay? But because we didn't fund certain things last year, does that mean he's gonna change his priorities? Or, we look at a certain other engine that's due 7 years from now, and did it have major complications with the engine or other things that now that's moved up and that's become a greater priority. So a 10-year plan's great, but as we discussed when we did this 2 years ago, it's gonna change year to year based on whatever fire is arising, based on whatever the status of the particular equipment is. So it's something that we should update every year.
You all set, John?
Okay, yes, okay.
Okay, anybody got anything else, man? I guess we're all set with that.
So the next time we'll talk about budget, obviously, is our next meeting, January 13th, we'll start talking revenues.
Right, because that's our next scheduled meeting, because we're not having the 23rd. Donnie, where's your list?
Yep.
My list, yeah, the boss gave me the list.
Check it.
All right, parade was Saturday, the decision was made to hold it anyway.
It was a heat wave.
Yeah, it was actually pretty good, it was cold, but it was nice.
How would you know?
That's right, I was in the truck. It was still cold in there, believe
That
me.
was.
See, I got the list from the boss, so. The fire trucks, first place engine 4 from Spencer, second engine 3, and third engine 2, all from Spencer. The floats, Boy Scout Troop 201, they had a pretty cool train-like float
Yeah, they
thing, it was
did.
pretty good. They came in third, Camp Marshall came in second, and first-time entrant this year, a bunch of kids from the high school got together and did a float.
They did a great job.
What is it, Island of Misfit Toys?
Yes.
Yeah, very clever.
And
They look like them too, they look
They
like
did.
characters too. It's
Did they? I
hilarious.
didn't even get to see them all dressed up, cause they, so, there's a $300 prize for that, and the Spencer Police Association, the cop union, donated that, they paid the prize. So they, Paul Majorowski came and wrote the check to him right there, but as he was doing it, they wanted to donate it to Toys for Tots, so that was nice of the kids at the high school.
That was good.
They had a good time. All right, here's the special thank you to the Spencer Police Department for doing a great job. All of a sudden, we were just flooded like 20 minutes before with cruises, and they hop, leapfrog downtown and block the streets, and also for the $300 prize. The fire department, once again, every truck comes out of that building and they light them up and they go down the street, and they've done that every year for 5 years. Those guys are awesome. Especially the highway.
They were
Because,
keeping that road clear.
yeah, an hour or so before, the snow started to stick, and a half hour before it was time to go out, there wasn't a stitch of snow on it, so they did a super job. Thank you to those guys. And I know they were busy, because we saw the trucks running all over the place. They actually had a truck decorated to go in it, but they couldn't drive it because they were all salt and sandy. Peter and Lisa Durant helped us build the float for us that day, and they came on it. Tony helped build it a little bit.
You jerk.
Bad day.
I lifted and lugged stuff over, I
did.
can't
He did.
hammer a nail straight. Durant wasn't that,
No power
that
equipment. not
impressive
coming.
either.
We usually use Wayne Fritz's trailer, Bo's brother, but his daughters are in, they're cheerleaders at the high school, so the high school used his trailer, so.
The Misfits, that was them.
The Misfits, yeah, that was Wayne's trailer. So Keith Morrison, a local contractor from town, he let us use it. Good guy, and it wasn't even a question. He just said, go grab it. So thank you, Keith. And then Billy and Donna Farmer, because it was, 5 degrees that morning? And they said we could use their giant heated garage to put it all together. So that was really good. That was really super good. And even though it was like 50, it was still nice. And Mary Madden, Spencer's oldest resident, 99 years old, so she as she came up with some relatives, drove around the lot, judged all the floats, and then she wanted to ride in the ladder truck.
Yep.
So they brought a ladder for her, a step ladder, got her up in the ladder truck. We had a banner made for the front that said Mary Madden, Grand Marshal for the parade. And she had a blast. And then she came to the studio after, and she gave the first place trophy to the high school. And told us why she wanted to ride in the ladder truck, because she wanted to ride in a fire truck, and originally it was gonna be with Bobby in the cruiser. But she said she wanted to ride in a fire truck just out of respect for what the firemen do and all the things they do, so. And
Good job.
she had a great time, I know that, so. And she's sharp as a tack, that one.
You don't miss a trick.
No,
And she caught you misspelling on her banner.
no, you know what? She goes, she's Mary E. Madden, and I'm guessing it's Elizabeth. I don't even know, but it's always E. So Wendy called to have the banner made, and I was right there, and she said, make sure it says E, and we picked it up, and it didn't have an E. And
Oh, I thought she was
And
saying
she picked it
Madden
up,
was
too.
the O, in Madden, she was complaining about,
no,
she wanted the middle
The
initial.
initial is E, yeah.
I see.
So, I mean, she wasn't mad, but she goes, she made it.
She let you know.
Yeah, she let us know. She did specifically
Yeah.
tell me, and she told me that a year and a half ago, so. But that was,
She's a hot ticket.
that was Zanardi at Girton Trophy, so. So all the floats were Camp Marshall, Young's Tree Service had their tree truck out,
Yeah, Winnie the
decorated up.
Pooh.
Would they have Winnie the Pooh on
Yeah,
it?
up on the,
Spencer Auto Body came out with a truck.
Yep.
Boy Scout Troop 201, the Civil Air Patrol of Worcester, they came out again. They come out every year in their van, they decorate. Lashaway Lake Association, that's a pretty good one. It's
Oh,
a
the boat,
Boat on a
yeah.
trailer, and they fill it up and light it up. Kids have a great time. Barnstone Cycle, Jake came out with his Husky and his old truck, decorated up. To my boys, Nicholas and Brent, because they always help. And his finally fiancee Shannon, he popped the question a month ago, so, after 10 years. Yeah, no. And the high school band wanted to play, but it was too cold, because like the flutes and the
Instruments, it's too
trumpets,
cold.
everything, it freezes all the passengers, so they couldn't. They always do, so it wasn't, they wanted to, believe me, but. And most of all, everyone who braved the cold and the snow to watch and cheer us on. There was a lot of people, there was just a lot of people in their
in the
cars.
cars, in the windows.
Windows and cars.
I do have to say, Donnie, because you did.
Hang on, one more. Cause I told him I'd do this. You know me and Mark James, we butt heads a lot.
He did a good
He-
job.
He did a great job with those kids. He
Fantastic.
him and Dave Baychamp put all this effort into helping those kids do that float, and good for him.
He said what, they did all the carpentry, cut it out for them.
Did
and they-
everything.
They put it.
Did everything
They
in
did a
the
good
carpentry
job,
shop.
fantastic job.
And he's like, oh, and I said, Mark, I give credit where credit's due. We can fight politics, and then, I don't
He
hate you
did.
at the end of the day. He said, you did a great job. He did a super job with those guys, so good for him.
And they want to do more next year, I think.
And
so,
Bob
right?
O'Brien, yeah, they already have ideas.
It was hilarious being on that
The
float.
the one thing I do have to say, and
What's
Donnie thanked Representative Durant and his wife, but I will tell you, we had a malfunction where we lost all the lights on the trailer.
Yeah.
And then Peter jumped in the car and ran home and brought back extension
Yeah, he
cord, and
did.
we finally got lit, so he did a real good job on speed.
It just died all of a sudden, 5 minutes before 10 minutes before we were leaving.
It was hilarious on being the last float in the parade, and you mentioned everyone in their cars, even the folks who were,
On the
came out
side.
further,
Yeah.
in front of their houses, screamed away to the floats.
Oh,
As
yeah.
soon as we came by, they all
See ya.
ran back to the houses.
It was a real great time.
By Spencer Furniture, Adam, from the very beginning of the road,
All
all
the
the
way
way down,
down.
they were lined up like pencils.
Some in the cemetery down the bottom, it was
And
pretty
everybody in their
good.
windows screaming, so there was a ton of people.
It was a good time.
There was still a lot on the street. I wouldn't have been on the street, no way.
And Mr. Chair, thanks to Donnie and Wendy. I mean, this would go off without, wouldn't go off without their direction and leadership. And this year, this guy put together the float. It has to be a world record this year. We usually start a few days ahead of time. It
It
was,
was me and you and Peter and Lisa and Wendy and the kids. So it wasn't me.
it was,
And she did everything. She got every float in there. She does all that stuff. All I do is the heavy lifting. She does everything else.
he started hammering that float at 9 in the morning. It was ready on time, so.
I wanted to start earlier. Pulled out of my driveway. I gotta tell you this.
Oh, this,
Pulled out of my driveway behind a truck. just pulled out, going down the street, all of a sudden stuff started blowing out the back of the truck, you know, a little paper and plastic, and I see this thing going, and it landed like right by the front on the ground. It was a box of nails, and it just exploded everywhere, right in the middle of the road. So I went, got Billy, and me and Brent spent an hour picking up roofing nails out of the middle of the road. So it would've been earlier.
Still a good job.
Great job.
Okay. Did you have something?
I did, I just wanted to share some, I noticed that the story of the brewery at the Abbey always gets a lot of attention, and I made a call to Father Dominic at the Abbey a couple weeks ago. My wife told me he was the guy to talk to, kind of the chief operating officer up there, and said, you know, there's a lot of interest in the brewery, and wanted to know what the Abbey was planning and the kind of access, and it was something we could work together with them on the town. And it turns out I called the day after the Trappist authorities in Europe had tasted the beer from the Abbey and approved it, and allowed them to put the Trappist label on their beer. So that was a lot of celebrating that night.
Were they
told me
open
how-
for business now?
Well, they're now, so now they're at the point of producing inventory.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know when it'll go on sale for the first time, but he was saying is working through all the permitting and all. I don't know if anything's come to us yet, but they'll be selling it you wanna sell it at the gift
At
shop?
the store, yeah.
At the gift shop, and also have a video, which have a presentation so people can see how it's brewed up on the grounds. And he said, without my even asking him, he said they want to do a special open house for the residents of Spencer in the spring and summer. And he specifically said he would, you know, like to sit down with us to talk about sort of logistics involved in coordinating it. And I think our experience with the district-wide meeting will come into play. We know how to manage crowds and anticipate some of these issues. So if it's okay with you, I'd be happy to be the kind of point person there and sit down with Adam initially, and they'd like to sit down with us. And you know, they really want to make it an event. They know that there's a lot of interest out there in the community, and they really want to, and they know the pride that people have in the Abbey, and they really want to bring people up there. On an ongoing basis, you know, tours will not be possible. That's why they're going to rely on the video presentation at the gift shop, because they don't have the space to handle large tours up there. It's also in the monastic enclosure, which is one of the conditions of brewing the beer and getting the label. It has to be on the grounds of the monastery. But I think they seem very open to look for as many ways to tell the story and to, you know, and to let people in on this new enterprise up there. So.
I must say, John, I followed up after we initially talked. I went to a couple beer blogs. They're gonna get hammered. Because there are people, there was one blog that had hundreds of entries just on this brewery alone.
I said, and that was one of the things I think we have to be really, have our eyes wide open on. And the Abbey may not realize the sheer numbers of people who are gonna wanna, get a look at the operation. So, and I said, Father Dominic, is the possibility of doing it a series of weekends? Said, yes, that's certainly possible, because they really want to make it a pleasant experience and make it a happy occasion for everybody. So I'll have more to report on that, and I'll continue talking with them on the plans. But they're very excited, and I said I won't ask you when the sports bar is planned, but we'll look for something. Probably not. But they're very excited, so let you know what's going on up there. But I was pleased that they really wanted to open it up as much as possible to the public. Enjoy.
I think that's great. There's nothing else?
To adjourn.
Motion. Second, all those in favor? Aye. And we'll see everybody on
January 13th.
13th. Thank you.